All right, awesome. All right, so welcome to the personalizing your web app with Fauna and Netlify. Glad to be here. Thanks for showing up, everybody. And today we have a very special guest, Jason from Netlify. You guys probably already know him. So yeah, I'll pass it to Jason. Jason.
Yeah, hi. I'm Jason. I'm the VP of Developer Experience at Netlify and the host of Learn with Jason. And I am super excited to be talking to y'all about just kind of what we can unlock on the web these days. I find it pretty exciting. I got a little preview of what Shadid's been working on, and we're going to talk through how it works and why it's cool.
All right, awesome. All right, so if you guys have any questions, please feel free to put all the questions in the chat section, and we'll get to them as we're working through. All right, so let me just get straight to the point. I'm going to share. All right, so I'm going to share my screen first of all. And White is going to share the sample code for this, and let's get to it. So here is the sample application that we're going to be taking a look at today, and we're going to post this link in the chat section. So here's our application. So here I have actually enabled my VPN, and now I'm in Germany. So basically what happens here, when we go to visit this marketing page, we see some content. And think of these content, these two images, some sort of ad that are personalized to your user. So based on the location of the browser, what the Netlify advanced middleware for Next.js did, it got the location of the user and actually got the particular personalized content for that user. So now if I actually go to my Chrome and try to open up the same link, and right here, let me just open up the same link, and I lost it right there. And you'll see a totally different type of content. And it will also show you like where I'm actually coming from. And we're actually populating these data from the Netlify Next.js middleware. All right, so that's our application in a nutshell. And I'm gonna give the floor to Jason again. He's gonna talk us through what Netlify Next middleware is and what it does. So,
sure. So the high level is that we're seeing a sort of global migration to the edge, where platforms and services are trying to find ways to make their services available as close to the users as possible. So what we've thought of as a CDN in the past is this idea that you have assets, so static assets, images, text files, HTML files. Those are then put on a CDN, which CDNs are collections of servers that are placed strategically around the world to make sure that when somebody makes a request for an asset, if they're in London, they will make a request from a server that's in London. So they get that asset very, very quickly. That's a kind of a solved problem with CDNs because, like AWS, Fastly, Akamai, Netlify, they've all got servers all over the world that make this stuff really, really easy. But for servers and for databases, this is really challenging because it's not just here's a static asset. It's here's this resource that's going to evolve quickly. You're going to be writing to it, reading from it. You need to make changes on the server that will affect somebody halfway around the world. And that means that you typically end up with a centralized data source. So you're hosting in US East 1 on Amazon, or you are in the Frankfurt data center or in the California data center. And you'll see that for, when you host a server, like if you're running, Docker or something like that, if you're running serverless functions, they're typically coming out of like the US East 1 region in AWS Lambda. And if you're running a database, kind of the same thing. It's going to be in one of those places. So what I find really exciting about the edge is that we've started to figure out how to move servers and databases out to the same close to the user locations that we were able to do with static assets. And so that means with Netlify Edge functions, when you make a request, not only are the images and the HTML files and the CSS files being grabbed from a node that's very close to the user, but now you can do little bits of business logic. And what's happening in this particular case is the Edge function has access to some geodata. It's got access to the actual request of the page. And that allows us to say, okay, this person is making a request in Toronto. It's hit one of our Toronto Edge nodes. We are going to hit Fauna, which is also at the Edge now, and read the data that is relevant to, like, give me the marketing information I want to show to people in Canada. And we can modify that at the Edge, really close to the user, so you don't get that delay that you would get if you were using a regionally hosted server or database. It's now close to the user, which is that's kind of the big revolution that we're looking at here, and why this is so cool.
Yeah, and to add to that, actually, Fauna is also globally distributed, and it's actually a database and one of a kind type of database that's actually globally distributed, and it syncs to global distributed nodes. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but yeah, here you're seeing that we're actually grabbing the data nearest to the Toronto or North America node.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, your application, your compute is on the edge. Your databases are on the edge. So your application is going to be really fast. And that's what Edge brings to the table. And with modern applications, split seconds matter. Actually, you don't want your users to wait for 4 or 5 seconds. That's almost unacceptable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right.
I think what I'm seeing is this shift toward, we want to do business logic where it is most performant. And when you're doing something really complicated, like you've got 4 or 5 database or 4 or 5 API calls to various software as a service platforms, and you need that work to happen quickly, that's when you reach for a serverless function, because they're all in the same data center. If everything is hosted in US East 1, then all of that logic happens really, really fast if everything's in US East 1. But when you're doing like reads, getting data from a database doesn't require you to be in the data center. You want that data as close to the user as possible. And now that we're seeing edge compute and databases moving out to the edge, it's such an exciting time, because it means that we can choose what the most performant option is based on the use case we're trying to solve, as opposed to being limited by the slowest link in the chain, which is what it's been for years and years.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the developer experience, I mean, everybody in this call probably already familiar with Netlify, and to an extent maybe familiar with Fauna as well. We really focus on the developer experience. I think edge computing and Netlify as a platform really focused on developer experience, and it lets you build that complete full stack serverless application on the edge, pretty much.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, a couple of years back, this wasn't really possible. You have to create Kubernetes nodes and things like that, Docker clusters, and kind of have to put it in different region. For small teams, it was almost impossible to have globally distributed apps. And,
right.
That's where the revolution is. If you're a front-end developer, if you a small team, you can pretty much get up and running with a working solution within hours, pretty much.
I think that's maybe the thing that gets me the most excited about web dev today, is that things that I'm talking about now that would be 5 years ago a 3-team job. You would need your whole DevOps team on it. You'd need a whole backend services team, and you need a front-end team. and actually 14, because you need a DBA as well, because you'd have to go like figure out how to do the sharding and global distribution of a database as well, like global replication. So now you just like me or you in 2 hours can go and sketch out the entire application, and all of those pieces are handled. Global deploy and distribution, global database replication and access, like all of the front end, all of the back end. It just works with this very like flattened developer experience. The learning curve is so shallow. I feel like we should start looking at the code here, because it kind of speaks for itself how quickly you can build all of these best practices into your tools without having to become a full-blown expert on DevOps or database administration, or all these other pieces that used to come with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Wyatt is going to drop the link to the GitHub link to the code in the chat, and I already have it. So I'm just going to open my editor here. And all right, so this is a really simple Next.js application that we're looking at here. And yeah, so we have our basic page. So this page is the home page pretty much, and we can go to the home page, and there's nothing there pretty much. It's just a link. And yeah, and we just go to this marketing page from there. This is a link to a marketing page, and this is the marketing page where everything is kind of happening. All right. So here, what we have a get static props that's just giving us a message, and we're actually transforming this message to the edge function, and we're going to take a look at it in a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, this is a simple. I've got some states here. Yeah, and we're getting all promotions and promotion from our edge function. So let's take a look at the Netlify Edge middleware itself.
Mm-hmm.
So right here, and this is where all the action is happening. And yeah, Jason, you're gonna jump in.
Sure. Yeah. So the middleware in Next.js is part of Next.js in general. So the specifics of what's happening that is enabling us to do this on Netlify is when you use Next middleware today on any other platform, you get access to a limited set of what's going on, and really you're limited to a redirect or a rewrite. So you can use it to send users to another page, or you can proxy other content in and show them something else. And we wanted to be able to do more. So we've extended that API to give you access to the full request, which allows for actual transformation and rewriting of the page. So here on line 10, you can see that we're taking the built-in Next request, and then we're upgrading it here with this middleware request that comes in from our Netlify Next package. And what that means is that we just enrich the existing Next request with the pieces that are provided by the Netlify edge functions. So it's an enhancement. It's an extension of what Next is capable of out of the box. And it's something that we have built in a way that we hope other platforms are able to adopt and get advantages from. But so what that means for us is that down here, we can get the full response of the next page by calling this middleware request.next. That actually gets like what was produced by the page here. And so then when we come down here, we can do things like completely replacing this prop with the geo request city. Here, we're able to grab that comes out of the middleware. So this is the city and the country. So that you get Toronto, Canada, or Portland, US, or wherever you're coming from. And then here we replace text, which is the element with the ID of message. So it's just like using document.query selector. And then we also are able to set the page prop, which is what we found in, if we jump back over to the marketing.js page,
Yeah.
we set a prop of message on line 8.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what we're replacing when we do that set page prop, right? So that's the part that's really cool about this, because you can use an edge function to do rewrites, but with the way that Next.js and other frameworks that are built on React or heavy JavaScript frameworks, the way that they function is they're actually doing a server-side render. So if you look at the source code of a Next.js app with JavaScript disabled, you're going to get the generated page. But then once the page loads, it goes and looks in the JSON. There's a script with a JSON tag in it. And we can actually look at this if you want to pull up the browser and inspect the source. We can see that the way that, let's go to the marketing page and then, open your dev tools, and we can look at in the elements, open the div ID next. And so this part here, this is what's generated by Next. But then if we go down and we look at that script ID next data,
right.
So this here, if you expand that, this is the JSON that includes, as you can see right at the top there, our page props message. So if you try to transform just the HTML, what ends up happening is when Next tries to hydrate, you get a hydration error, a React hydration error, because the original content doesn't match the hydrated content, and React doesn't like that. So you can't just like go in and modify the HTML. You have to actually modify the page props as well, so that when it hydrates, everything matches up and Next continues to work. So this is tricky to do, but this is how we've kind of worked through this problem and allowed for dynamic transformation at the edge of our Next app. So you can do full personalization here. You can do something like, for example, grabbing the city like we've done, but you can also do things like when you go to the Zillow homepage, for example, it's going to first show you listings in your area. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, like that is geographic personalization. So using our edge functions, you could transform your Next app to use the location that somebody's calling from or requesting from, and then show them relevant results based on their location in the world. Or you could check what the referrer was. Salma on my team, Salma Alam-Naylor, just built an example where if you click a link to her site from Twitter or Reddit or other popular link sharing sites, it will give you a custom greeting that says like, hey, thanks for coming over from Reddit. I'm, like, here's some links about me, or whatever you want to do. You can personalize that experience. And all of that is possible because we've got access to this extended API where we can translate or we can transform the content. If you try to do that with a proxy or a redirect, you have to build a custom page for each one of these, like each variant, and then write the logic for doing the proxies. And that's possible, but it's very cumbersome and it gets kind of tricky to maintain over time. So by doing these direct transformations, you're able to do just personalization of the pieces that need to change instead of maintaining a lot of separate pages that are almost identical except for a small personalization.
Yeah. Awesome. Like that was a really informative explanation, Jason. Yeah, I think we have some questions. Curious how to use edge functions without Next or without the Next framework.
Yes. So edge functions were designed without a framework. So if you want to, I can grab a link. HTML rewriter. I did an article on how to use edge functions to do the same kind of transformation. Let me drop it in the chat here. So this is a framework free. You can do this with plain old HTML. And I've got a couple other examples as well, like air quality, edge functions. This one will show you what the air quality is in your immediate vicinity. Oops, if I can get it to, I can copy paste. Here it is. So that link, when you open it, it'll show you what the air quality is near you. This is relevant to my interest because I'm in Portland, which I think is like the 4th worst air quality in the world right now due to some fires. But it's the point is it absolutely works with other frameworks, and you can use it with just plain HTML. You don't need a framework at all.
That's really cool. That is really cool. And everything here is happening on the server side, you know, like everything is server rendered. So you're not doing any complicated logic or rewrites in the client side, which is also
Right.
important because like it gives you like a better experience, a faster, like snappier experience, right?
Exactly. You're moving that work to a server where it's cacheable, where it's, you know, you're not using the client CPU or running up their browser memory, which is just, it's all little things that make a big difference when you're trying to get all this stuff added up.
Yeah,
Hey,
absolutely.
Shadid and Jason, we actually had a question that's probably more relevant now than during the Q&A, but Steve is asking, he's saying he's getting a little lost in the next details. I think when you were inspecting the marketing page, he says, what's running where and when?
Ah, gotcha. Yeah, so let's go back and let's disable JavaScript, like in the browser.
Oh, okay. All right. That's how do I do that? I haven't done it.
It's you can actually do it if you hit, I think it's Command P in there. It'll give you like a little quick switcher.
Right.
You got to have the dev tools open to do it.
Oh, it's not Command print.
Is it Command Shift P? Might be. Can't remember. There it is. Yeah. Now disable JavaScript. Just like disable. There it is. This little command palette's like changed my life. Okay, so then reload the page.
All right.
All right, so check this out. Because we're using edge functions, do you see how it's still transformed? It still says Toronto, Canada, even though we don't have JavaScript enabled. But because we're using useEffect in Next to load the promotion, then the client side stuff doesn't render, which means that the filtered products don't actually show. So this is a really good comparison of like what the strength of this approach is that in Next.js, anything that you put through get static props that's not rendered in a use effect, and this is getting into the weeds of React a little bit, but basically use effect escapes the initial render and makes things client side only. So what we're doing with our components when we look at the marketing page is we are sending a rendered component down. So it is, you know, the div, it's got the heading, it's got this prefix of this is a static page that's been transformed. And then it's got this other div or element that's containing our promo that if no promo is set, which is what we said in the use effect, it then renders these components in, right? So what we're able to do here is because we're using edge functions, because we're transforming the text on the rendered page, as well as in the props. So looking here, we've still got the next data, but because we disabled JavaScript, we never hydrate the page and use that data. But it's still transformed in there. So if you scroll over to what the message is, it's going to show the Toronto, Canada there, which is what would be used when Next mounts. That's the hydration step that turns it into an interactive app, right? So I hope that answers your question. Let me know if I didn't, there's something you want to dive into a little bit more. But that's that is the idea. I think there's a good question for you about Fauna storing and serving different content for different regions. How does that work?
Yeah. So let's dive into the code, but I think we had a follow-up question.
Okay.
Yeah, is this SEO friendly? And I would say yes, because everything is coming from, like, as you can see in here, like the data, which we're actually getting these data from Fauna, and we're getting them from our edge node. And you know, even though you don't see it here, but the data is coming back. So yes, even if you turn the JavaScript off, it is going to be SEO friendly. Yeah.
Yes. And the trick with this is it depends on what you're personalizing to, because if you're personalizing the entire page where you're changing the headline, you're changing the meta description, like all of those things based on who somebody is or where they're coming from, that is going to mess with your SEO, because your H1 and the paragraph, like the description and stuff, that's what Google will use. So Google is going to pull in whatever its server gets from the Edge function will be what shows up in search results. So if you're doing something like, you want your H1 to be, the best restaurants, and by default it's near you, but if you're in Portland, it says the best restaurants in Portland, and then you want to customize which results show, you might want to do something like masking a redirect and saying, like your site.com/Portland or your site.com/ the home route is near you. So that if, Google finds the /Portland, it then includes results for Portland. Like this is what you'll find if you look at the way that these bigger companies that do listings that are global, when they do that customization, they're going to route you to a page that's close to you so that it's SEO friendly. So there are some considerations with it, and it basically comes down to like, are you personalizing a greeting so that somebody feels like they're getting an experience that's just for them, or are you changing the content of the page entirely? And depending on how much of the page you're changing, you might want to change your URL handling a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So
you could absolutely do search bot detection to not personalize in that case. Yes.
Mm-hmm. All right. So that dynamic, the dynamic content. So that's actually a really great point. So I was gonna show. Let's dive deep into the code. So here, what we're actually doing, we're actually getting the data, the promotion data from Fauna, and we're only changing part of the marketing page, like I showed in the first two demo. So in Frankfurt, there's only you get only 2 promo, and anywhere in North America you get more, like 3 or 4 promos, 3 promos. So we are actually getting that data from the database that are in that region, or the database that is close to that the user. So let's take a look at it quick. And here I'm actually using the Fauna GraphQL. So we're using GraphQL to connect to Fauna using RPL. So I'm going to show you guys how this is done. So this is our get data. This is our get data function, and it's taking in a region. And all we do is change our Fauna secret, and then it will automatically get hit the closest node in that region. So for example, we have many nodes in EU, but as soon as you say that, hey, get this from EU, it's going to go to the closest node. So for Germany, it would be Frankfurt. For France, it would be somewhere near there. Yeah, it could be Paris or something like that. And that's how this whole thing is working. So yeah, like you keep your data's you keep your data and on the edge. You do your compute on the edge, and you do your rendering on server side. So it's like the world is your oyster pretty much. Like you can customize like how many ways you want. You can have user information in your data. So it's absolutely, yeah. Hope that answers that question. All right.
Yep.
So
I have a little hack that we can do that will actually make a big difference for us, because somebody asked, can we get the personalization data so that it'll work without JavaScript? And we can. So let's go into the marketing.js page, and let's create in VS Code.
All right.
And let's add a prop below line 8 here of promotions. And then what I want to do is let's set that to just be an empty array.
All right.
And let's then use, or wait, is it promotion? It's promotion, singular,
Yeah.
like the, yeah. And then what I want to do is I actually just want to refactor to get rid of this use state and the use effect altogether. We can just get rid of those. And then on line 26, you can do a check for promotion instead of all promotions. Okay. So, and you can, maybe what you can do is do a promotion.length so that if it's empty, it'll still show the no promo for me.
Oh, okay. All right. So, and
yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, there you go. So now when we run this, and you'll probably just want to run it locally or something so that we don't have to deploy it. Well, I guess we can deploy the whole thing. Depends on depends on how you're feeling right now. But what that'll actually change is, so now the promotion gets set at the edge function. So if the edge function isn't run or anything like that, then it would just, no promo. We default back to the no promo, but it doesn't fail because it's an empty array. So it just, it's got something to map over even, no matter what. And then what we can do is, because we're using the edge function to set that page prop to be the promotions, it will then drop that in for us and build out the page. And so that,
let's go to local host.
Let's see, is this going to give us the hydration error?
Yeah, there you go. No,
it's not. Okay, so turn off JavaScript.
Oh, no. How do I do that?
Command P, I think.
And
then do a, you got to do a greater than bracket to make that work. There you go, disable. All right, run it again. No promo for me. Wait, did we save?
I think we did. And it's coming from.
Yeah, so there's our promotion. So oh shoot. Okay. So there's one extra step here, which is that we would need to go and update the HTML. So we'd have to use the rewriter to do it. Which might be a little more time than we want to spend right now, just because it involves like building the elements.
I actually seen it in one of the demos.
Yeah, it would be the same thing as using the HTML rewriter. Let me see if I have a quick example that we can pull from. But the general idea stays the same, that you are able to just kind of map over the results and make changes, which is really, really nice. I don't have an example immediately at hand that we can just like copy paste. But yeah, the general idea here is that the same way that we rewrote the text, you can also rewrite. Let me find the Next.js advanced middleware, and we will grab out the rewrite. There we go. So I'm just going to drop this blog because I don't think we'll have time to do a full rewrite here. But that's the guts of how that would work, is it would let you kind of jump in there and make those HTML changes right in place.
Awesome. And we have a couple. Okay, let me just bring it up. I think we have another really good question.
So what are the time limits for running a Netlify Edge function, and how does this compare with the Fauna response time? Any further recommendations on what's reasonable to query? So the limits on a Netlify Edge function are execution time, not waiting time. So when you make a request to Fauna, the HTTP request, like the time to make the request and receive the data, doesn't count toward execution time. So what you're looking at is actual CPU clock time of like running a loop or doing processing, and that is limited to 50 milliseconds. So I wouldn't recommend, say, trying to transform an image in an edge function. That's going to take too long. It's too CPU intensive. But making a request to Fauna is not going to run over time. Like even if you're in the 99th percentile and your request takes 2 seconds or something, it still won't overrun your edge function. It'll as long as your like handling of the response doesn't take more than 50 milliseconds to complete.
Mm-hmm. But there's no size limit on Netlify edge functions though, right?
There is a size limit, but it's pretty high. I think it's around 50 megabytes. So, you most likely you'd be holding it pretty weird to hit that limit. So yeah, if the JavaScript that we write in an edge function should be well within the 50 megabyte limit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just to add to Jason's point, yes, you can pretty much query anything from the database because when you're doing query to like when you're making a Fauna query, you're only making an API call pretty much. So everything, all the computation and stuff can be handled in Fauna. And you can make this API call with GraphQL. So here I'm doing it with GraphQL, but you can also use FQL, which is our database language. And we also have like Fauna functions, which are functions that we call them user-defined functions. They're kind of like Postgres user-defined function or functions that are run inside databases, and you can do all the computation there, and then Fauna will just give you the data, and the response time for that is it's like the latency is really low for that as well. Yeah, I can send you some benchmark data. But yeah, like the whole point, like the whole philosophy of Fauna is that we treat database like an API pretty much, and you can just like make an API call and specify what you need from the database, and it just gives you back, which is really complementary to edge functions, because you don't want to have you don't want to like load your logic in edge functions. You should just ask for what you need, query, let the database handle everything.
Yeah, and I think that brings up just a good overall software architecture point is consider where the work is done and how often it needs to be done. Because if you can move it further back in the stack, then if you're querying an index database as part of a whatever what do you call it, a user-defined function, those are going to be optimized in a way that my JavaScript is not. Right. So you can, if you can build it into the places that it, has the tightest relationship with the data, that can be a good optimization choice. Or, if you have to do some parsing, if you're going to loop over something and change your data from being a big response down to just the 2 or 3 fields you need for personalization, do that in the edge function as opposed to doing that on the client side, because otherwise you have to send all that data down, and every single browser has to download it. Every single browser has to like optimize that information. So, you just look for ways to find the right optimization so that you're not spending more time than you need to, or wasting any of the processing time for your users when they actually have to access the application.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a really great point. Yeah. So Jason, where can our viewers learn more about edge functions, Netlify edge functions, and samples? What do you recommend for learning these things?
Yeah, we have wonderful docs. So if you go to our docs and check out the Edge function section, it includes a link to a whole bunch of examples, which I will just link directly to. We have an Edge function examples site. We also have a good collection of articles on our blog, which I've already linked earlier. So you can just go into the Edge functions category or tag to find more of those. And I guess I can drop a link directly to that. Why not? If I can. Oh, we didn't tag these with Edge functions. Great. Okay, so never mind. If you go to our blog and search for Edge functions, and also you can always follow me on Twitter if you have questions or anything like that. I am at Jay Langsdorff on here. I'll just drop a link in here as well.
Awesome. Awesome. And yeah, we also have a lot of integration with Netlify Edge function. There's an Astro blog coming with Netlify and Fauna. I'll also put the Fauna documentation in the chat. Yeah, tons of integration. You guys can also check out Fauna Labs, and you'll see tons of Netlify, Next.js, Netlify, Vault, all with Fauna, all type of integration that we put together. Those are always like sample labs, always a good place to start.
All right. There was one more question that we can answer really quickly. Is there any analytics tool for the personalization and A/B tests? The answer is not built in, right? But you can hook anything in because those analytics are just API calls, and you can send those from Edge functions. So you can grab whatever you want and say, like, we grabbed Canada out of the geo data, send to Google Analytics or Amplitude or anything like that. Send that to, from the Edge function, and then you can track those things. But no, there's nothing built in.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can, and we're talking about the future of the web pretty much, and everything is just making API calls at this point. So you can also, hook in Google Analytics and things like that, and save the data in Fauna database, collect personal information if you want. Yeah, disclaimer.
Yeah, when we described the internet as a series of tubes, what we meant by tubes was API calls.
Yeah, that's a very poetic analogy. All right. Yeah, any more questions? Anything? Just Wyatt, Shashank, any questions do you guys want to bring up? All right.
No, I think you all answered most of the ones that were mentioned through the chat or the Q&A. But maybe just give it a quick minute here to see if there's anybody else that has a question.
Oh, another question I kind of had for Jason. The Netlify Edge functions, they do run on Dino runtime, right? But here in this project, I'm running Node. So how does that work? Like, just out of curiosity.
Magic. So the way that we do it under the hood is we are doing a tiny bit of static analysis to figure out what features you're using in your next project, and then we route things to the right runtime based on how you've configured it. Because we also use our Edge functions, for example, to transform images. The next image, for example, we actually run that through Edge functions to do content negotiation, so that we can figure out what, like if you've ever seen Cloudinary, how they do content type auto, and then if your browser can support it, they'll send you WebP, but then it falls back to PNG or JPEG or whatever. We do that now, but we have to do that in an edge function because we need access to your request headers to figure that out, which means using edge functions. So all of that is done kind of behind the scenes, where we can detect the way that you're using it, and then make decisions about how we deploy based on the characteristics of your app.
That's actually really smart. And this works for other frameworks as well, for example, like, or do you guys plan on doing it?
Yes, absolutely. So it is possible today. You can use, there's a tool called HTML Rewriter. That's the one that I linked in my blog. I'll drop another link so it's fresh here. What you would have to do is you would need to figure out how your framework stores the page data. So any SSR rendering framework is going to embed the page data somehow. And most of them have taken the approach that Next did, where there's the hydrate or the rendered version of the page, which is just static HTML, which is easy to transform. It's not easy. It's very straightforward to transform. HTML Rewriter is built for that purpose. Then there's the hydration data, the props. You can find that in Next. It's called Next Data. In Gatsby, they do the same. It's a JSON blob. I would suspect that Nuxt is the same, where you're going to find a JSON blob somewhere down there. And what you would be doing is transforming the HTML, which is, you just use HTML Rewriter and do a transform. The article I just linked shows you how to do that. The next thing you would need to do is get the content of that JSON blob, parse it, transform the thing that you need to transform, and then serialize it back into that script tag. And that would be how you would transform. So that's what we're doing. We've just built convenience APIs with set page props and stuff like that. We intend to do this for all the major frameworks over time. In the short term, you can do it yourself by just kind of working out how the hydration works in your framework of choice, and making sure that you update both the rendered part and the hydration part.
So it is doable. It's but the first party support is right in the corner. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, it's on the way.
All right. Awesome.
Hey, Jason, one other question that just dropped in. David is asking if there's any chance to have these features in Nuxt. And I guess specifically what he's referring to is the middleware thing. But it seems like you may have just answered that as well.
The middleware right now runs generically. It'll run on, like, you configure that through. So in Next, you've got the special middleware thing. In any Netlify project, you can use a netlify.toml to set an edge function to run on any resource. It actually doesn't even have to be HTML. You can run it on like a .css file if you want. I don't know if you would really want to do that. Maybe don't, but you have the option. So the personal, like the custom APIs for Next are unique, but the ability to use middleware in general, you would just use edge functions for that. Edge functions are middleware. It's just not built into the framework yet.
Yeah. Great explanation there, Jason. There's another question about Fauna. Does Fauna provide QA URLs? So Fauna is actually free to use. You can just get on a free account, no credit card required, and we have a very generous free plan. This whole application, I do have a bunch of applications that are actually running on the free forever Fauna account. So I'm just gonna quickly demo it. So how
would one create like a staging and a production version if you wanted to pull a copy of your database and do some personalization tests?
Yes. So to do that, actually to copy and backup, you do need an individual or a team plan.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but you can take a snapshot of your data and create a copy the database pretty much. So for example, here I have two databases that are copies of each other. So for example, this is Personalize EU and Personalize US. So I'm on a free plan, so I kind of had to write a write a script to copy the data.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're on an individual plan, you can take a snapshot or you can do a backup restore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's one feature that's not available in free version. Uh, but, but yeah, feel free to drop me a line. We can work something out. All right. All right. Awesome. So we're coming at time pretty much. Any more questions? I think we answered pretty much all of it. All right. So how's how are Netlify edge functions built? So like, what's the billing?
The billing on them is, this is actually a great question. Did we update our pricing for this? Right now they're in beta, which I believe means we haven't finalized pricing yet. I think that's the reason that they're in beta, is because we haven't finalized pricing yet. Let me see if I can find anything on it. Okay, you have on the free tier, you get 3 million invocations per month, which is quite a few until you get into the higher traffic, right? And then if you get a pro account, it goes up to 15 million. That's $19 a month per seat. And then 150 million if you're on our business tier. And then if you want to talk to sales and get like a full like enterprise plan, then those limits are significantly higher. But you know, this has actually been pretty exciting. We're running this with some of the biggest customers that we have, like Riot Games, for example, which is the company behind Valorant and League of Legends, is using edge functions, and so they're doing like millions and millions of invocations of these functions just all the time, and it's actually pretty cool to see what our bigger companies are capable of doing. But yeah, so we want to make it pretty generous for people to try, and then as you start using it for more like business specific applications, then we have plans for you to graduate into over time. An invocation is a call to the edge function. So for example, if you are running an edge function, like with your middleware, for example, if you use it in Next.js, it would basically be every page view would be an invocation, because we run that middleware against every page. So if you wanted to filter that, you can use our netlify.toml and only run it against a certain path, so that it's only an invocation for that one path that you want to personalize. And so this is sort of the, actually, we might have a way to do that limiting from the middleware. I do think there's a config object. So that would prevent the function from doing the rest, but it's still invoked. So you actually need to prevent it from invoking entirely, which there is middleware. Let me see if I can find the docs for this. Next.js middleware here. And then there's config on how to actually, let's see, where is it? Yeah, there is a matcher config. If you look at, let me do the matching paths. Oh, wait, that's not right. Here's the matcher. That's what we want. Let me link to this directly. So that's if you export that config, you can make sure that your function only invokes for the path or subset of paths that you want to match. And then you can also do that with your netlify.toml in any other framework. So any time that it runs, which is basically any page that it matches, so it would be one page request is one edge function invocation. And then of course you can stack edge functions as well. So you could run, 20 edge functions against your page if you wanted to. And then if that would be one page load is 20 invocations.
It's funny that you mentioned Riot Games, Jason, because that's like a the textbook example of personalization. So if, I don't know if you play League of Legends, but let's say if if I'm playing like the same 5 heroes all the time, and I'm in Canada, and let's say there's a big tournament happening, that's like they have my data, and
Right.
they have my location every time I visit the page, and they can just hit the right database and get the right content from me.
Exactly.
So
yeah, I mean, like e-commerce is huge, but even stuff like, imagine you're running any software as a service. So Fauna, for example, in your app dashboard, you're going to have things that are new, but you only want to show it to me if I haven't tried it, for example, right? Like if I joined your beta program, maybe you don't need to tell me that I'm using some new feature because I've already activated it. So now you can personalize your dashboard to say like, hey, user, you've never tried this thing before. Do you want to give it a shot? And as soon as I try it, you now know that I'm somebody who's done that, and you can customize my display to reflect that, right? And you can do that without a bunch of client-side stuff. And it really starts to open up some really cool and custom use cases that don't require a lot of client-side JavaScript. And I think that's the part that I find really exciting, is it doesn't mean you have to like get really heavy with the way that you deliver content to your users. You don't have to add lots and lots of tools on top. You're not including a bunch of third-party scripts. You get to use these edge functions to solve these problems in a way that has no client-side JavaScript impact to the user.
absolutely, and like without compromising any performance. So
exactly,
your page load is really important, guys. So, awesome.
All right,
awesome.
I think that puts us at time.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Jason, for coming over and sharing everything about Netlify Edge function. I hope hope our viewers found it useful. And any last words you have for everybody?
No, just thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. I hope everybody's watching. I'm seeing some good comments coming in. I hope you got some ideas on what you can go and build with this, because it really is like, once this clicked in my head, I just had a million ideas for things that I wanted to build and try and put together. So I hope that it has a similar creative response for you. And please do tag me on Twitter or wherever, whatever social media platform, if you do end up building something, because I'd love to see it.
Awesome. Thanks again, Jason.
All right. Thanks, y'all.
All right. So we're gonna call it. Thank you, guys.